You're ringing round for a quote on a diesel that runs fine, and 3 garages in a row tell you they can't fit you in. So here are the 12 diesel engines UK workshops quietly refuse, what actually breaks inside each one, what the repair really costs in pounds, and how to spot every single one of them from the driver's seat before your money leaves your hand. Let me be straight with you about the word banned, because I'm not going to pretend otherwise for the sake of a title. Nobody in Westminster has outlawed an engine. There is no list pinned up at the DVSA. The ban is commercial and it's real, and if you've ever been told the diary is full by a garage with 2 empty ramps, you have already met it. Independents turn this work away because the jobs are gearbox out or engine out, or because the failure has already eaten something they can't see until they're 8 hours in and committed. One diesel specialist put it plainly enough. This kind of work involves seized fixings, broken studs, awkward access, and many hours of labour, and if something goes wrong, it becomes an expensive repair very quickly. That's the whole story. It isn't cowardice, it's arithmetic. And the arithmetic has moved. Independent garages in the UK are typically charging somewhere between $55 and $95 an hour in 2026, while main dealers sit in a different bracket entirely, $85 to $165 for mainstream brands, and $120 to $180 or more for the premium Marques. Multiply that by 20 hours of engine-out labour, and you can see why the man behind the counter would rather do 4 cam bolts and a clutch. 2 things to hold on to while we go. On number 4, the entire fault is a gasket that the factory did not fit. 1 part, pennies, and it turns a chain into a consumable. And on number 11, one UK specialist's published price, to put that engine right, is £7,120, including VAT, which is more than most of those vehicles are now worth. Here's the thread running through all 12, and it's worth understanding before we start counting. Because once you see it, you'll spot the next one yourself without any help from me. Every engine on this list was designed to a European emissions target, and almost every one of them solved that target by moving something inside. The timing drive went from the accessible front of the block to the awkward back of it. The belt went from a dry cover you could unbolt in the car park to a bath of engine oil. The oil pump stopped being driven off the crank and started being driven off something else. Each of those moves brought a small, measurable gain, a fraction of a decibel, a fraction of a % of friction, a gram or 2 of CO2 on the certification cycle. And every one of them took a serviceable part and made it a strip down. Think of it like burying the stopcock under the kitchen floor. Nothing wrong with the stopcock? It'll probably last 20 years, but the day it doesn't, you're not turning a tap, you're lifting a floor. The old hands who trained on Perkins and the naturally aspirated Ford diesels never had to think this way. Because on those engines, the expensive part was the part that wore out. On these, the expensive part is the part you have to move to reach it. Number 1, and it's the biggest single reason a UK garage's phone rings this year. Ford's 2.0 EcoBlue diesel, launched in 2016 under the internal name Panther, and fitted to the Transit Custom, the Tourneo, the Ranger, the Cougar, the Mondeo, and a very large number of motorhomes. This engine uses a wet belt, a rubber timing belt that runs inside the crankcase submerged in oil, and a second belt in there driving the oil pump. Ford did it for noise and friction. On paper, it's elegant. Here's what happens in the real world. Diesel gets past the rings during DPF regeneration and thins the oil, and that diluted oil attacks the belt from the outside in. The belt doesn't snap first, it sheds. Fine black rubber crumb goes round with the oil and collects in the pickup strainer at the bottom of the sump. And once that strainer glazes over, you lose oil pressure everywhere at once. Bearings, camshafts, turbo. The engine that kills itself isn't killed by a snapped belt. It's killed by its own belt, clogging its own oil supply. Ford's original figure for that belt was 10 years or 150,000 miles. The service interval for the timing belt, tensioner and idlers, was then reduced to 6 years or 100,000 miles, applying to all Transit and Transit Custom, van and Tourneo vehicles fitted with the 2.0-litre EcoBlue diesel. Specialists who do nothing else are more cautious still. One UK wet belt outfit recommends replacement between 60,000 and 80,000 miles or every 6 years, whichever comes first. The job itself is why garages say no. The 2.0 EcoBlue contains both a primary timing belt and a secondary oil pump belt, both submerged in oil, and accessing them requires a deep engine strip down and between 6 and 10 hours of methodical specialist work. Expect roughly $1,300 to $500 at a specialist with new covers. Get it wrong or leave it, and you're into engine replacement territory north of $5,000. What to listen for? An oil pressure warning that flickers and clears, a low oil pressure light at hot idle, and black rubber specks on the dipstick or in the drain oil at service time. If your independent drops the sump and finds crumb, believe him. Number 2. The BMW N47, the 2.0-litre four-cylinder diesel in the 118D, 120'd, 318'd, 320'd and 520'd from 2007 onward. The engine that put more UK company car drivers on the hard shoulder than any other of its era. The chain sits at the rear of the engine, making access difficult and repairs expensive if a problem isn't caught early. By the way, if you want to keep your car running for as long as possible without wasting money on unnecessary garage bills, I put together a guide called the 500k Mile Car Care Bible. It covers 101 habits that can help your car last longer, the warning signs you should never ignore, and how to spot unnecessary repairs and garage upsells before they cost you a fortune. To get your copy, just scan the QR code on screen with your phone's camera, or use the first pinned comment below. The primary chain drives the camshafts. A second chain drives the diesel pump, and when the main chain stretches, the tensioner can no longer hold the correct position. Sources disagree on when it goes, and I want to be honest about that, rather than give you a number I can't stand behind. Some specialists quote 80,000 to 120,000 miles. Others say 60,000 upwards. I take the pessimistic end and plan around it, because the cost of being wrong is enormous, and the cost of being early is a chain kit. Why the trade hates it. To reach the chain, the transmission has to come out, which is a major job before the chain work even begins. And it's also the reason BMW didn't design these chains as serviceable items, because accessing them is so labour-intensive that they were intended to last the life of the engine. In practice, they didn't. On pre-2011 builds, it's a gearbox-out job at $1,500 to $2,500 at a specialist, and failure usually destroys the engine, a $4,000 to $6,000 rebuild bill. The tell is a metallic rattle on the first cold start of the day that fades once oil pressure builds, not the normal diesel clatter. A distinctly loose, tinny sound from the back of the block near the bulkhead. 2 seconds of it is 2 seconds too many. Number 3. The 1.6-litre PSA unit, sold as the HDI, the TDCi, the D, and the Drive, depending who badged it, the DV6, fitted to a variety of Peugeot, Citroën, Ford, Volvo, Mazda and Mini models. Millions of them in this country, and the fault is one of the most elegantly stupid things I've ever come across. There's a small wire gauze strainer inside the banjo bolt that feeds oil to the turbocharger. It's there to protect the turbo. Carbon builds in the oil, worse on short trips, worse on stretched services, worse on the wrong oil, and that gauze blocks. The part designed to protect the turbo is the part that kills it. One workshop measured it directly. Oil pressure at the turbo at idle was around 0.8 bar, way below the recommended 2.3 bar minimum. And it was clear the turbo had failed due to oil starvation. With the gauze removed, the pressure came back to 3.4 bar, which is more than acceptable for this engine. And the reason garages won't take it on isn't the turbo, it's the rest. Do it properly, and the sump must come off and the oil strainer pickup cleaned or replaced before the new turbo goes on, and the oil cooler and filter assembly removed and cleaned too. Fit a turbo without that, and you'll be doing it again inside a few thousand miles, on your own money, with a very unhappy customer. Cheaper to say no. Number 4, the Vauxhall 1.6 CDTi, marketed as the Whisper Diesel, in the Astra, Insignia, Mocha and Zafira. Here's the loop I flagged. The original timing chain tensioner lacks a gasket, which allows oil to drain out when the engine is switched off. So when you restart, the chain rattles until oil pressure builds back up. Do that twice a day for 6 years and the chain wears. The fix is a modified gasket that holds a residual reserve of oil in the tensioner. A gasket. That's it. And to fit it on a car that's already been rattling, you're taking the subframe, gearbox and sump off, which is why owners are quoted well over £1,000 for a part that could have been fitted on the line for pennies. Right? 4 in. Notice what you've just heard 4 times over. Nothing has actually worn out prematurely because of bad metal. In every case, a good part was put somewhere unreachable, or a cheap part was left off, and the bill is the location, not the component. From here it escalates, because the next group aren't hundreds of pounds of misplaced labour. They're engines that specialists refuse to rebuild at all, even when you offer to pay. And I still owe you number 7, where the entire failure hangs on a 6mm bar of hexagon steel, and number 11 with its 7/10. Number 5? The Jaguar Land Rover 2.0 Ingenium Diesel, engine codes AJ200D and 204DTD, fitted from 2015 to the XE, XF, E-Pace, F-Pace, Discovery Sport, Evoque and Vela. 2 chains, both at the back of the engine. The chains stretch, guides wear out and shed plastic debris, tensioners weaken, and it usually shows up around 60,000 to 80,000 miles, starting with a rattle on cold starts, and potentially escalating to misfires, power loss, or a snapped chain, putting pistons into valves. There's a nasty second act. Those shed plastic fragments end up in the sump and can block the oil pickup, which takes out bearings and the turbo as a bonus. And on the ownership question, no fudging. This is not subject to recall, and unless your car is under warranty, the repair cost falls to the owner. One UK specialist quotes a fixed $1,945, including VAT for the full chain replacement on genuine parts, engine out. Another declines to rebuild one that's already snapped at all, and advises a replacement engine instead. Number 6, the Mercedes OM651. The 2.1 4-cylinder in the C-Class, E-Class, Vito and Sprinter from 2008. Same story, different badge, rear chain, and in workshop order of frequency, the faults run timing chain stretch and guide wear, injector faults, particularly early Delphi piezo units on pre-2012 engines, EGR clogging, water pump failure, and DPF and AdBlue faults on the Euro 6 variants. The upgrade path is worth knowing if you're shopping. From 2014 onward, Mercedes fitted Bosch solenoid injectors in place of the failure-prone Delphi piezo units, updated the chain tensioners, revised the balance shaft assemblies, and improved the EGR coolers. And post-2014 engines with proper maintenance can reach 150,000 to 200,000 miles. So the year matters more than the mileage. A tidy 2016 with 90,000 is a better bet than a 2010 with 60,000. And if you take nothing else from this one, take that. Still with me? Good. 6 down, 6 to go, and the second half is where the money gets serious. If this is the kind of thing you want more of, subscribe, and I'll keep pulling engines apart on here. Now, number 7, and the hexagon bar I promised you. Number 7. The Volkswagen Group 2.0 TDI of the mid-2000s, the longitudinal PD engines in the Passat, A4 and A6, engine codes BLB, BRE, BPW, BKP, and their relatives. To smooth the engine, VW added balance shafts. Introducing those balancer shafts required the oil pump to be relocated and driven directly from the second balancer shaft using a short 6mm hexagonal shaft. That's the whole thing. Your oil pump, the component every bearing in the engine depends on, is driven by a stub of hex bar sitting in a socket. And that hex bar has inadequate engagement depth with the grooves in the slave shaft, so torsional oscillations from the balance shafts destroy the oil pump coupling. The corners round off. The pump stops turning. The oil pressure light comes on about 4 seconds after it stopped mattering. The pumps typically fail between 60,000 and 100,000 miles. And once it happens, it's pretty much curtains for the engine. And here's the bit that tells you everything about how well understood this was. The third version of the drive arrived in 2010 with the newer common rail engines, with a better gear drive and a longer 100mm key, a longer bar, deeper engagement. The fix was always available. It just wasn't there when you bought it. Garages won't touch it because you cannot inspect it without pulling the module. And once you're that deep, the customer's £500 quote has become a £2,000 conversation, and the customer has already checked their bank balance against the first number. Number 8, and this one's short because there's nothing clever about it. The Renault 1.5 DCi, engine code K9K, in the Clio, Megane, Kangoo, Duster, Qashqai and Juke. Injectors and big ends. Cranking connecting rod bearings is one of the most severe failures on this engine, and the reason is most often untimely engine oil changes. Small sump, hot turbo, long service intervals sold as a feature. Garages don't refuse the injector work, they refuse the diagnosis, because the symptoms of a tired injector and a tired bottom end overlap enough that you can spend a customer's money twice and fix nothing. 8 down. And the pattern has quietly changed under your feet. The first 6 were about access, about parts put where you can't reach them. These last few are different. From here, the fault is one the manufacturer knew about, wrote down somewhere, and dealt with by a route that wasn't a recall. Number 11 is the sharpest example of that, and it's coming in 2. Number 9. The Mazda 2.2 SkyActiv-D in the 6, the 3, and the CX-5. Mazda made a genuinely interesting engineering choice here. They dropped the compression ratio to cut NOx at source so they could meet the first version of Euro 6 without an AdBlue system. Clever. But the consequence is heavy reliance on exhaust gas recirculation, and the well-documented result is regeneration problems and high oil dilution rates. Diesel injected for regeneration ends up in the sump, and the oil level climbs instead of dropping. Now, I'll flag my standing here. The detailed regeneration intervals I've seen come from dealer technicians on forums rather than a published Mazda document, so treat the specifics loosely. What I'd take seriously is the safety point, and it's a real one. Rising oil levels from failed regenerations are dangerous, and the oil should be drained and replaced immediately if detected. Overfull, diesel-thinned oil can be drawn into the intake and run the engine on its own sump. If your dipstick is reading above the top mark on any modern diesel, that is not a good problem. That's a stop driving problem. Number 10. BMW straight 6 diesels, the N47 and B57 families in the 330, 530, X3 and X5. And here the issue isn't wear, it's fire. In 2018, BMW recalled 268,000 UK diesel cars after it was found that glycol leakage from the exhaust gas recirculation cooler could result in burning soot deposits when combined with the high temperatures inside the EGR system. That recall was later extended to a further 27,000 UK vehicles, with the DVSA updating the recall notice with the latest affected VIN numbers. Then it happened again, In 2023, BMW recalled 30,012 mini models and 4,023 BMW 2 Series active Tourers, with diesel engines built between 2013 and 2018 over the same potential glycol leak and the same fire risk, following on from the previous recalls for the same issue in 2018 and 2019. That's your action item on this one, and it costs nothing. Put your registration into the government's recall checker tonight. Recall work is free. Fire is not. Number 11. The Land Rover 3.0 TDV6 and SDV6 in the Discovery 4, Range Rover Sport and Jaguar XM5, and the loop I've been holding since the start. These engines deliver excellent torque and refinement, but are known for crankshaft and bearing failures. And when the crankshaft snaps, or bearings spin, the only reliable fix is a full long engine replacement. The mechanism is geometry. The crankshaft is compact and narrow by design, meaning it has weak points between the rod-bearing journals and counterweights. And those weak points are stressed by normal operation as well as by poor maintenance, aggressive driving or repeated periods of maximum load. Towing a caravan up the A9 is exactly the load case that finds them. Warning is often minimal: rhythmic knocking from the lower block, sudden loss of oil pressure or metallic debris in the oil filter, and some engines seize instantly without warning. Now the number. One UK specialist publishes it openly. A reconditioned 3.0 TDV6 long engine, supplied and fitted at 7,610, including VAT for models up to 2015, and 9,130 thalers, including VAT for the Gen 2 long engine, with a refundable core surcharge if the old engine has a snapped crankshaft or damaged block. And this is why no local garage will offer you a cheaper rebuild instead, however much you'd like one. As one engine supplier puts it, they regularly quote for replacement and are told a cheaper recondition has been offered elsewhere, which is astonishing because Land Rover do not sell oversized bearings for either of these engines, which makes repairing an existing engine by that method impossible. And new crankshafts are out of stock most of the time due to high demand. If somebody quotes you $3,000 to rebuild one of these in situ, ask them where the oversized shells are coming from and watch what happens to their face. Number 12, and it's the odd one out, because the engine isn't broken, it was altered. The Volkswagen Group EA189 2.0 TDI. Volkswagen admitted that 11 million vehicles worldwide, including almost 1.2 million in the UK, were affected by the defeat device software. And in 2022, VW agreed to pay 193 mentos to more than 90,000 drivers in England and Wales after settling a High Court claim over emissions cheating devices, with, and this matters, no admissions in respect of liability, causation or loss made by any of the defendants. What garages inherited was the aftermath. A car recalled for a software change, brought back in 18 months later with a fouled EGR valve or a struggling filter, and an owner who is absolutely certain the fix caused it. Sometimes it did. Sometimes the car had done 60,000 short urban miles and was always going to. I genuinely cannot tell you which, and neither can the man on the ramp. That's my honest read rather than a finding. And it's exactly why he won't take the job. He'd be repairing a car whose owner is already angry at somebody he'll never get to argue with. Now let's talk about number 1 again, because it's the one where I can show you the whole hand. You bought a Transit. The handbook said the timing belt was good for 10 years or 150,000 miles. That number wasn't decoration. It was part of what you were buying. You priced the van against a rival. You worked out your running costs per mile. You quoted jobs off that arithmetic, and the belt was a problem for the next owner. Then the number moved. 6 years or 100,000 miles down from 10 years or 150,000. Read that again, because it isn't a service recommendation. It's an admission, written in the only language that never has to say sorry. Somebody at Ford ran the warranty data, saw the belts degrading, and instead of a recall, they revised a figure in a schedule and posted it to the dealer network. and the cost of that revision is yours. Every 6 years, roughly $1,300 to $1,500 at a specialist, for a component that on any dry belt diesel would be a routine £400 afternoon. Over the working life of a van, that's 4 figures of maintenance you were never quoted, on a part that was described to you as lasting the vehicle. As of the middle of 2026, there is no official safety recall for the wet belt system in the UK, and the DVSA has not classified the failure as a safety defect. On the petrol side, Ford has offered repairs on a goodwill basis for vehicles up to 7 years old with a full service history. Goodwill. Case by case. With conditions you have to prove, here's what makes it indefensible rather than merely disappointing. A rival did it differently with the same problem. Stellantis extended the warranty on previous generations of its PureTech engines due to excessive oil consumption and premature timing belt degradation, covering 100% of the costs for up to 10 years, or 112,000 miles, both parts and labour, under certain conditions. Different sources put that mileage figure slightly differently, so take the lower one and check your own car. And beyond the warranty, an online portal was expanded to accept UK claims from customers who incurred expenses relating to excessive oil consumption or premature timing belt failure between January 2022 and December 2024. So it can be done. It's been done in this country by a company with the same flawed idea in its engine bay, which means when Ford handed you a shorter interval instead, that wasn't the only option on the table. It was the cheapest one, and the one that transferred the whole cost to you while looking, on paper, like responsible engineering guidance. They knew before you did. And what they offered you was a smaller number in a handbook. Here's the part I actually find hopeful. And it isn't about any manufacturer. Everything I've told you today, the trade knew first. Not from a bulletin, not from a press release, not from any regulator. It came from a bloke in Mansfield who'd done 6 of them, telling a bloke in Cheltenham who'd done 9, who mentioned it to a supplier who'd started stocking the uprated tensioner because he kept getting asked. Nobody organised that. Nobody was paid for it. The most reliable early warning system for defective engineering in this country is several thousand people in oil-stained overalls talking to each other, and it consistently beats the official channels by 2 or 3 years. That's the thing worth protecting, not the engines. Most of these will be gone within a decade, and good riddance to a few. What's worth protecting is the habit of knowledge moving sideways between people who have no commercial reason to share it, purely because it's useful, and because the next bloke shouldn't have to learn it the hard way. Every trade has that. Sparks have it, plumbers have it, roofers have it. It's the closest thing we've got to a warranty that actually covers you, and it costs nothing except being willing to pass it on when it's your turn. So here's the procedure. Not a rule of thumb, something you can run on your own numbers, on any used diesel, in any car park in Britain. 1. Find the exact engine code, not the badge. The V5 and the VIN plate will get you there, and the code is what determines everything on this list. 2. Establish where the timing drive lives and whether it's serviceable with the engine in the car. Front and accessible, you've got a maintenance item. Rear, or in oil, you've got a liability, and it needs a number attached. 3. Get that number before you buy, not after. Ring 2 independents, give them the code and the mileage, and ask what the worst-case timing job costs on that engine. 10 minutes on the phone, 4. Put the registration through the government's free recall checker. Outstanding recall work is free, and number 10 on this list is a fire risk. 5. Start it from stone cold. Not warm, not run round the block by the cellar. Properly cold, first turn of the day. Stand at the back of the engine and listen for 2 seconds. A rattle that fades is a chain telling you it's loose, and waiting until it stops rattling is not a sign it has fixed itself. 6. Pull the dipstick. Level above the maximum, or a diesel smell off the oil means dilution, and you walk away from it. And the decision rule. if the worst-case timing or oil drive job on that engine costs more than a third of what you're being asked to pay for the car, you need documented proof it's already been done. A receipt with a part number on it, not a story. No paperwork, no deal, or the price comes down by the full cost of the job. That's not being difficult. That's pricing a known liability, which is what the seller has already done. Do that, and here's what happens. Nothing. That's the payoff. On a wet Tuesday in 4 years' time, the phone doesn't ring with a garage telling you they found rubber crumb in your sump. The bill you would otherwise have paid simply never arrives, and you'll never know exactly which day you avoided it. Best money you ever didn't spend. Now, I want to hear from you, and specifically, I want the two extremes. Tell me the diesel that ruined you, what it was, what let go, what the invoice said, and whether anyone contributed a penny towards it. And tell me the opposite, because I know you're out there. The boring old lump on its original everything at 250,000 miles, still starting first turn on a frosty morning. I read these, all of them, and there are engines on this list I've had my hands inside 100 times that I'd still change my mind about if enough of you told me I'd called it wrong. If this was useful, subscribe, because I keep running into a related thread I haven't pulled yet, the dual mass flywheel, which is the other component on half these cars that costs 4 figures and gets quietly bundled into the quote while the gearbox is already out. Nobody's ever properly explained to me why it became standard fitment on engines that don't need one, and I'm still working on it. Until then, cold start, 2 seconds, listen. It's the cheapest diagnostic in the world, and it's already fitted to your ears.